Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. A major rumour emerging today that Lance Stroll is considering stepping away from Formula 1 and retiring from the sport, leaving Aston Martin in the very near future. This would come as a massive shock, I think, for a driver to voluntarily step away, but it would open up a surprise seat for either next year or the year after to plenty of drivers that might be after it, with Aston Martin improving dramatically from last year to this. Very much enjoy taking your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Couple of quick updates. First of all, Ferrari confirmed that Robert Schwartzman will do a free practice session instead of, I believe, Carlos Sainz in Zandvoort. He was the runner-up, I think, in 2021 Formula 2 season to Oscar Piastri, and has been touted as a potential Formula 1 level driver in the future. So he's getting a chance. Pretty sure Fred Vasseur said to Oliver Behrman, like, look, just focus on Formula 2 because Behrman's got that campaign going on. So he might not be in the car anytime soon. There's also this livery, if you guys can just about see it on screen. This is Alfa Romeo's livery they've got for this weekend. I can kind of see the whole thing here, which is kind of nice. Usually I'll just share normal images, but if you guys want to see every last detail, this is what it's going to be looking like. So anyway, that's the, I mean, it's a really nice looking thing, to be fair, for this weekend, the Alfa Romeo. Hopefully the car goes as fast as it looks good, because it hasn't really done that much this season, have they, Alfa? Now let's talk Aston Martin, because Dan Fellows says that they've got upgrades. They're coming, we believe, in Canada. They had a good race in Canada. Alonso came P2, and of course Stroll's home Grand Prix didn't necessarily go as they anticipated or would have liked it to, but ever since those upgrades, they've actually, if anything, made them understand the car a little bit less, and in Zandvoort they're bringing upgrades to try and resolve that, and maybe get back to a point where they can try and be the second fastest car again at some point this season, like they were right at the very start. But this is where the discussions around Lance Stroll come into play. Reports have been emerging and rumours have been going around, and according to Ben Anderson over at, former editor of the GP Racing magazine, that Stroll is considering switching to tennis, which is like, hang on a second, right? But, I mean, look, let's just read through what he has to say. Stroll is too far behind Alonso, but really, he's only likely to leave that team voluntarily. He's on a rolling contract in his dad's organisation. This is absolutely true as far as we understand, that, you know, Lance Stroll is not going to be going anywhere off the back of a Lawrence Stroll decision. He's in that team. You know, Lance Stroll, I'm sure, wants to win the World Championship for Lawrence, and the other way around as well. But at the end of the day, maybe Lance just thinks, you know, there's too much pressure on him, and, you know, I think he realises, and he's even said recently, Lance, that he just isn't at Alonso's level. He's like, well, I don't really understand where I'm losing the time, but I'm just not quick enough, really, relative to Alonso. And probably that realisation has set in a while ago, but Stroll probably knows that, like, look, he's not really a World Championship quality driver, and he's done quite well, Stroll, in his career. Like, he's an acceptable level driver. I don't think he's terrible by any means. He's had, what, 3 podiums is it? He had that pole position in Istanbul Park in 2020, but outside of that, especially with this year's pretty good Aston Martin, he arguably should have done better than he has. So, you know, and Stroll's been around in Formula 1 for a long time now, and he's been around several years now. So maybe there is a realistic world in which Stroll decides, you know what, for various reasons, I don't really want to continue here. I'm getting kind of, you know, people are roasting me all left, right, and centre. I'm getting slammed by Alonso. I'm not really going to win the championship, you know, with the way that I drive relative to a better teammate, and maybe he also doesn't see Aston Martin immediately becoming a real force to win races and championships over the next couple of years. So anyway, this is the rumour that, you know, he's looking for a switch to tennis, which is kind of wild. That said, I don't think he's really keeping anyone off the grid who truly belongs there, but there is an argument to say that Stroll isn't the quality of a driver to be in what is actually right now a very, you know, rather good, at least, Aston Martin, especially at the start of the season. And if they are going to make continued progress, Aston Martin, from year to year, I think many people would like to see a driver that isn't Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, to see what he could do against Alonso, but also to see, you know, let's say Alonso Leclerc, just by example. I don't think Leclerc's going there, but just theoretically, that would be an interesting combination. And there are other options as well we'll get into in a second, such as Daniel Ricciardo, Albon, Yuki Tsunoda have already been mentioned. And this is another point that you've got to remember. Aston Martin are partnering with Honda going into 2026. That relationship with Tsunoda might be a possibility. Now, in the immediate future, maybe not. But if Tsunoda is offered the chance, this is the thing of your Yuki. Does he see a chance in the Red Bull in the next couple of years? Maybe he does. He's doing quite well. It's definitely possible. But let's say Daniel Ricciardo comes in and beats Tsunoda this year, and Ricciardo's the man that Red Bull want to bring in post-Perez. Tsunoda might think, you know what, the possibility possibility of going to Aston Martin Honda, or at least Aston Martin for now and then Honda in the future, is pretty attractive. Even Oscar Piastri, McLaren, they might make progress again, but Aston Martin have, over the balance of the season, been the stronger team so far. So it raises interesting questions if there is a surprise seat available. So obviously Ricciardo might be leading the charge. There's also been some discussions about Alex Palou as well, who is, I think, technically McLaren's reserve driver, but also has been massively linked to a potential Formula 1 move into the near future. And as I say, Stroll gets roasted all the time, right? This was on, I think, what's this guy's name? Chris Evans. Yeah, his breakfast show, I think just this morning or yesterday, and they had the McLaren boys on, and Zach Brown says, I'm dominating this game, just like Stroll is getting dominated by Alonso, basically, right? So, the guy gets right. It's not like it matters, really, the public perception of Stroll, but he might have just had enough of Formula 1 at this point, and I wouldn't necessarily blame him. I will also, because I've got to mention this, there's no better time to mention this. I saw someone make the comment a few weeks ago, I think when Carlos Alcaraz won Wimbledon, that he looks quite a lot like Lance Stroll. I don't know if you guys see this, right? But, I don't know. Do you guys think Carlos Alcaraz, of course, we're talking about this because maybe Stroll wants to go and play tennis and, take up tennis as a professional sport. I don't know. But, I don't know. I feel like there's got to be something in this, right? Now, if you guys don't see it, fair enough. But I think that they look kind of similar, to be honest. And even just looking at the season so far, this is Stroll versus Alonso. In qualifying, it's been all Alonso in the race, laps ahead, points scored. And to be honest, Alonso scored 149 points. Stroll's 47 is pretty tragic, it's got to be said. And in terms of qualifying gap, Stroll's routinely out nowadays in Q2. And even the gap probably averages at around 3 to 4 tenths. And in qualifying, that's arguably nigh on unacceptable, right? Now, if he wasn't Lawrence Stroll's son, would he be fired for this level of performance relative to Alonso? Quite possibly, yes. But he's not going to be fired unless he decides to leave, is how it seems right now. And, look at the gap here from Aston Martin. From 12 races in, 2022 versus 2023, this is the jump that they have made. Now, I don't expect them to make another similar jump next season, but there is a lot of people that would like a driver better than Lance Stroll in that car alongside Alonso, because, Alonso might be around 2 more years, maybe, we'll see about that, but he's got to retire at some point, and there's always been a talk as, when Alonso retires, there'll be a good seat available at Aston Martin for what hopefully will be a pretty good car in a couple of years' time, maybe even competing for championships, at least if Lawrence Stroll gets what he wants to get out of the team. But if there's another seat available, that makes things really exciting for some of the drivers lower down on the grid that would like a seat. Now, Aston Martin say, look, we're not a top team yet, it's going to take some time. We've got to develop a better car than we presently have. But if Lance Stroll is considering stepping away and has consistently said, even, this is a few days ago, Fernando is faster than me, I have to figure out why. But I'm sure he knows why, is that, Alonso's Alonso, and even if it's not prime Alonso, he's still performing at a very competent level, and Stroll just doesn't have the talent of a guy like Alonso. He's a solid driver, but he's nothing spectacular. And despite whatever Alonso might say, I don't think that Stroll's ever going to win a World Drivers' Championship. So this then raises the question, who comes in instead? You've got the likes of Liam Lawson, who's the reserve driver at AlphaTauri. You've got Schwartzman at Ferrari, we mentioned, Schumacher at Mercedes and Williams. This is just the reserve drivers. Aston Martin's reserve of Van Dorn and Drugovich, definitely an interesting candidate possibility there. But I'd say it's more likely that it's going to be a guy like, let's say Stroll does retire imminently and says, I'm not coming back anymore, I've had enough of this. Palou, or as we saw, Ricciardo, maybe even a Piastri, or maybe Alex Albon. I know that he said that he does want to stay at Williams as the team makes progress, and the recent rumour we heard was that Ferrari are interested in Albon once Sainz goes, because I don't think Sainz is getting extended beyond next year. He might, but I'd be surprised if he does. So, and if Albon thinks that there's a chance he can go to Ferrari or to Mercedes or even back to Red Bull, then I don't think he's going to take the Aston Martin seat. So maybe not Albon, but a driver that's slightly less in high demand than Albon could be a really good potential target for Aston Martin. And if Stroll does tell his dad, look, I've had enough of this, I want out of this sport, I want to take up tennis, do something else. And to be fair, if he hadn't fractured his wrist or whatever it was at the start of the season, maybe his early season point score looks a little bit more respectable, and now the car's fallen off, that gap is probably going to be maintaining itself to some degree. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comments below, and who do you think should come in instead of Lance Stroll if he was to step away in a massively surprising way to go and play tennis? Just before we close out the video, I did want to mention there have been some reports going around as to what Mercedes are up to. Andrew Chauvelin and I believe Mike Elliott were discussing the recent changes to their car, and Andrew Chauvelin actually says, the article here was titled, Mercedes finally have basically full understanding of the way the ground effect interacts with their car. Now, the quote doesn't necessarily go to quite that length. As Andrew Chauvelin says, we are now coming to a stage where the correlation is good. We are beginning to understand the effects of change. Nevertheless, of course, we're not in the position where we, have the 2021 regulations where everything is very much under control. So this is the thing. It seems like Red Bull started out this level of cars with the ground effect on a massive front foot advantage, probably thanks in large part to Adrian Newey, but now Mercedes are in a position where they're kind of confident that they understand what's going on. They understand the way the ground effect is interacting. They bring changes to their car and it does what they want it to do. It might not be crazy fast, but it's this correlation. Now, I gotta say, this isn't the first time that Mercedes have mentioned correlation. I'm pretty sure after Spain 2022, they said, oh yeah, the correlation's good. We got it covered, boys. This new upgrade has brought us this, solved the porpoising, and we're now back in business. Turned out a couple of races later, they hadn't, and there was still correlation issues, and it was even as recently as a few races ago where Toto Wolff was saying that, yeah, well, things in the sim still don't quite match things in reality. So I wouldn't be surprised if in like 2 races time, Mercedes are again saying, yeah, we don't fully understand this. But maybe this is the last and final time, and Mercedes finally do understand what's going on. They know what is causing changes with their car, and that, of course, is, fundamental to their understanding. If they finally know what's happening here, then they can appropriately design next year's car, because until now, teams have massively struggled with this, especially Mercedes. These cars are tricky. The depth of the regulations, the ground effects, it's clearly a difficult era to get right. But making the developments they want to make happen is not necessarily going to be easy, because he actually did mention the other day a talking point that I've discussed a little while ago. This is actually from James Allison, but he said it's much harder to invest than it used to be. Kind of the thought process is that when you invest in, let's say you put something in the wind tunnel, producing it in real life is doable for sure, but with the cost cap, you have to be more careful, and therefore, instead of producing like as many upgrades as you possibly want, you kind of have to be reduced to 2 to 3 big upgrade packages per season, which isn't necessarily enough to overhaul some of the advantages that certain teams have had at the start of the season. And just one thing to close up with here from Vasseur, who said that the FIA has told Ferrari that the results of the budget cap are now finalised. The big rumour was that, oh yeah, well, Aston Martin might be over, Mercedes or Red Bull might be over. I think Ferrari were meant to be okay, so we'll see. But apparently early September, that's when it's meant to be announced, and he said that he trusts in the FIA to announce the schedules. So that's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing if there's any big drama that comes out of that, and there probably will be. Let's be honest. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.